your weekly horoscope with Jerry and Matt.
I will have my vengeance.
Hey, good evening, horror fans. Welcome to another edition of the Weekly Horoscope. This is our post-Christmas episode. I hope everyone had a great holiday season. I'm your host, Jerry, here with my partner, Matt. And Matt, with Christmas behind us, we kind of settle into the frigid, icy cold winter, especially in the northern parts of the country. So we wanted to pick a category that kind of got into that, and we're going to do vengeance served cold. And I think this is a pretty cool category. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think there's a better way to start off the year with a little bit of revenge. It's one of the gnarliest topics in horror. I mean, some of the most visceral movies I've ever seen were revenge movies. So it's always a good topic.
Yeah, there's a lot of history and a deep pool of movies that kind of focus on this. You know, the first few that jumped into mind when we had this category was I Spit on Your Grave from 1978, which of course was remade with multiple sequels also. There's an excellent movie from 2017 called Revenge that fits this category nicely. The Nicolas Cage lunatic fest called Mandy from 2018 is very much a revenge movie. But
we had different opinions on that movie, didn't we? With Mandy, I liked it. I thought it was visually very interesting, and I remember
I liked it as well.
Maybe
not as much as you did, but he's a kook, and like they just went full bore, leaned into his psychosis, and there's some crazy scenes in that movie. But I wanted to throw this out, and thinking about this category, almost every slasher, by definition, is a revenge movie, because if you look at the lore and the history and the background of all the slashers, they're usually trying to right some wrong. You go to Pamela Voorhees was killing camp counselors because camp counselors were more concerned with sex and drugs than watching her son. And, Freddy Krueger was burned by a mob in Mob Justice. And Michael Myers was ignored by a babysitter. And in fact, the working title of Halloween was the babysitter murders. And all the slashers seem to be a attempt to right some wrong, and in some essence be a revenge movie.
Yeah, I think the one difference that would really differentiate that would be it's displaced vengeance, right? They're like, whereas like a revenge movie typically has revenge on the direct people that wrong them, and with a slasher they've kind of displaced that it's like a psychosis where they're actually just lashing out on the wrong people, right? And that kind of makes them like a serial killer. Yes, they're trying to get some kind of revenge for some wrongs that were done to them, but they're doing it to the wrong people, and that's what makes them the bad guy.
Absolutely. And I had that distinction noted as well. That's the one difference. They're trying to get revenge, and they're just taking it out on everyone, whether it's the right person or not.
Which is what a bully is, right? I mean, they've got some kind of psychosis going, and that's a great point.
So we're going to start with what might be, in American horror lore, maybe considered the first revenge horror movie, and we're going to go with Last House on the Left from 1972, Wes Craven's directorial debut. It was also produced by Sean S. Cunningham, who went on to make the Friday the 13th movies. Mm-hmm. So there's a kind of a historical spot here where this film really launched a lot of horror careers. Had you seen this movie prior to this?
I had never seen the original. I had seen the remake. And the only reason I didn't go back and watch this one was because after I saw the new one, the remake, I just heard a lot about how it was very dated. The 72 version was like, it's a real dated movie for its time. It was, it left its mark in history. And I'd watched the new one, and I was like, well, if I've already seen the new updated version, do I need? Mm-hmm. I just never went back and watched it.
I found an interesting thing researching this. This movie was originally planned as a rough adult film, and kind of got shifted gears into a horror film. And you can actually see some of the lingering ideas from it being an adult film. And in fact, one of our main characters, we start with Mary turning 17, and we open with a shower scene of Mary, and it's acknowledging that she's just turning 17 that day, and we open with watching her in the shower. And there's actually a cut scene that was filmed that is her standing in her room topless reading birthday cards. And apparently that cut was forever lost, but it was actually filmed. And it's like, this is a weird way to start this movie,
Yeah, that's kind of like exploitation to like it's almost legal limit,
Yeah,
like,
it's like
that stuff makes me more uncomfortable than watching someone's eye get ripped out.
It's and I'm like, I made note of that right away. Like, really, this is how we meet this girl turning 17 that day. So she was, 16 and 364 days yesterday. Just very
that's an even bigger point, right? Yeah.
She's going to see the band Bloodlust with her friend Phyllis, who her parents don't like because she's kind of the wrong side of the tracks girl, and it's rough side of town, but they let her go. Braless, of course. This is the 70s.
Yeah, and they're kind of like haggling her a little bit, saying that she's kind of dressed like provocatively, but she's just wearing a sweater.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it shows you how they're trying to explain how conservative right that family is. That's what they're trying to say.
And she's right behind her dad, and he turns around and he's like, I can see your nipples. And it's just like, it's just so odd. That dynamic. It's like, my God, leave this poor girl alone.
Yeah, you're gonna traumatize her. Well,
as she's leaving, her father gives her a peace necklace as a present for her birthday. So she gets in the car and she picks up Phyllis, and they're on their way. And we hear a radio report of some escaped prisoners. There's the gang leader Krug, Weasel, Krug's son Junior, and a crazy woman named Sadie. We hear all this on the radio. So of course our young girls want to buy weed on the way to the concert, and they just so happen to approach Junior, who's hanging outside, and they approach him looking for weed. He brings them upstairs to where the gang is hiding out, and the girls are in trouble.
Yeah, this movie, I noticed there's a lot of naivety and of trusting people that you shouldn't trust, and that's kind of where a lot happens.
And you wonder, the early 70s is a different time. People were a lot more trusting back then, didn't lock their doors, that type of thing. And that's going to come up later in the movie, where it's a scenario that's unimaginable today that takes place in the movie. But speaking of trust, Weasel pulls a knife on the girls, and Krug punches Phyllis in the stomach. And in the morning, we see the gang packing up to leave in their convertible Cadillac, and they load the unconscious girls into the trunk. And I had a weird thought in that, what happened all night? Because it's hard to believe that they just had a sleepover with this gang of brutal thugs. But it's never touched upon. And then when things happen during the day, it's as if these things have happened for the first time. So it's a kind of a loophole in the plot, I think.
Yeah, it is, because I was under the impression that he punches her in the stomach and then continues to sexually assault her. Like they kind of like pan the camera back on Mary, and Mary's like, oh my God, and like you can hear Phyllis kind of going, stop, and then the scene ends. So it's like, okay, we know what's going to happen. And then they touch on drugs a lot in this movie, like give Junior his hit. So you imagine they probably just drugged them and made them pass out.
Yeah,
right. They use your imagination kind of thing. Like I think they might have done that intentionally. Like you figure it out. Like obviously, it wasn't anything good that they did.
Yeah,
but then when it happened later the next day, it's like the girls were never harmed to begin with, right?
What's going to happen? It all happens for the first time,
right?
Which I just found weird. But
so maybe they just drugged them because they were passed out when they brought them down there, right?
Yeah. There's a really and I will note David Hess plays Krug, and he is a very believable, creepy, thug-like guy. He is an evil character. The actor does a great job. The actor also does some of the music.
Yeah, which is like the singing, like because they have this this like folk song when they're in the car, and it's like explaining what they're doing. Like it's kind of hokey, but like I think that's the whole point. That was him. Was that probably him? Yeah, I imagine.
He was a musician as well as an actor, and he did some of the music as well as. And I made a note. That's a really weird song that they're playing about the exploits of this gang while the gang's leaving.
Yeah, it was very Bugs Bunny-ish kind of. The one thing I'll say about this movie, there was a lot of this very low budget. It's Wes Craven's first movie. It has that student film feel to it, almost like real low budget. But the acting was really good. I thought all the actors were good. I thought it was believable. I thought that you could tell they put their heart and soul into this movie. Like all these actors, I thought they did a good job with what they were given. You know, it's not going to win an Oscar or anything like that. But I thought each character was like a believable character with the dialogue they had. You know, it's believable psychopath. So, you know.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the parents have prepared birthday decorations and cake, but Mary never comes home. Obviously, we know where Mary is. And they call the cops, who are literally like bumbling Keystone cops. We see the sheriff is just eating her birthday cake while he's telling them, it's probably nothing. You know, kids like to blow off some steam. I'm sure it's no big deal.
Albert and Costello kind of thing. Abbott and Costello.
And the deputy is Martin Kove, who goes on to be the leader of Cobra Kai years later.
Yes, that's right. That's who I reckon. I was trying to figure out who he was. All right.
Yeah, early role for him, but the cops are just useless, bumbling idiots in this movie.
Like literally, at one point they run out of gas, and they're like, it's like, trying to hitch a ride with a chicken coop on a truck.
This isn't a movie with like some lighthearted moments to break the tension. They really almost feel out of place.
Yeah, there was some things that felt out of place. Another thing I thought was the old timey saloon piano music they would play sometimes. I just didn't get that.
I read
right out of it.
They purposely tried to stay away from the standard horror movie music alignment, in that they would play sometimes upbeat music when horrible things were happening, and they played music that didn't fit the scene, and they wanted it to be disorienting on purpose.
Artistically, I understand that, and especially like trying to try new things. You're a new director, you know. I understand that there's a surrealist element to art that sometimes that works, right? Like putting something completely the wrong music for the wrong scene, but like it just works, you know, and it kind of creates this 1 + 1 = 3 thing, right? It creates this new effect. I get that.
Yeah, I don't know that it worked in this case.
Not in this one, but I understand the concept of it. I understand the concept of it, right?
The car breaks down. The Cadillac breaks down with the gang, and they pull over. And when Krug opens the trunk, Phyllis bites him. You know, the girls are awake now. And they drag the girls off in the woods, and we see that they broke down right by Mary's house. There's a scene at the beginning where the postman is delivering all these cards to Mary, and he's like super nosy, reading like who they're all from and everything. And then we realize we're in front of the same mailbox.
Yeah, it says Mary on it, which I think adds to more dread because they're right there. You know, like it's like if she was isolated in some faraway place, like, oh, they're doomed. But it's like you're as the audience, you're rooting like they're right across the street. Just go.
Yeah, you know? And they drag the girls in the woods, and Krug degrades them. He makes one girl wet her pants, which I read they actually did.
Had to do that.
No special effect. She just did it. He strips them, he cuts Mary, he makes them fondle each other. There's an uncut version where that goes on, and it's not really necessary, because I'll say this about this movie. The blood is somewhat minimal, particularly by today's standards. But the grimy awfulness of everything that they're doing still holds up. It's uncomfortable. It goes on for quite a bit of time. And as I said, the Krug character is like, he's a real bastard, and you feel it. It's just awful what these girls are subjected to.
Yeah, they all have their own touch of like evilness to them in their own way. You know, like Weasel's kind of like, he's weaselly, he's kind of like this like real, just comes off as just real predatory, and then Krug's just seems like just demonstrative evil person, and the girl's kind of cheering them on and wants to get in on it, and like they're all just complete scumbags.
Yeah, they're all crazy, except with the possible exception of Junior, who is, according to the news report, Krug addicted his own son to heroin so that he could control him. And we see that play out throughout the movie.
Yeah, and you can tell he's the one character that wants to change. Like there's one scene where he's watching this stuff happen and there's a teardrop coming down from his eye. Like he doesn't, like he's somewhat human. I mean, he's complicit either way. He's, a bad guy, but yeah.
Yep. Krug goes to the car to get something and Phyllis escapes, telling Mary that to get away while they're chasing her. Junior stays with Mary and she recognizes that he's not like the others and she's nice to him. He didn't really want any part of it to begin with. But he's addicted to heroin and he has to stay in line to get his fix. She gives him her necklace that she had just gotten as a gift, tells her that her dad is a doctor and he'll be able to get him a fix. And, this whole thing's going on where she's trying to work him into helping her escape. Meanwhile, Weasel and Sadie are chasing Phyllis through the woods and, they chase her up and down and over. At one point, Sadie catches her, but Phyllis clocks her with a rock and gets away again. And we see she runs through a cemetery and we see the road. And there's a car go by and there's hope that she's going to make it free. Yeah. And then she's cut off by Krug.
I thought they did a good job right there with that scene by using the sound of the car as the sound of hope, right? Because throughout the whole scene, all you're hearing is the crunching of leaves and it's real quiet and you're just watching them run. And then she gets out to this area and you can hear the car, that sound of the of the passing car, and like it lets I thought it was well directed in that sense.
Yeah, it was like freedom and cut off, right? And you don't see Krug coming. He surprises the audience as much as he surprises Phyllis. But when he stops her, Weasel stabs her in the back, and as she crawls away, she can't get very far. They stab her repeatedly and pull her guts out. Actually,
which I thought was like you said, it's not a gory movie. This movie is more like tense driven, the intensity of what's happening. But that was actually a pretty gnarly scene right there when they show her hand going in her stomach and put some Tom Savini stuff right there.
Yeah, and they used the actor who played Weasel actually came up with the special effect. He had an experience as an actor in adult films, which makes sense for his character. But he actually, to create the guts, he used condoms filled with fake blood and like different other
sausages.
Things. Yeah, exactly.
Made condom sausages with fake blood.
I made. We did a zombie house for Halloween one year, and we had body parts everywhere. And I had a body on a table, and very Day of the Dead like I had his guts spilled out, and we made intestines we bought sausage casings. And we filled it with cooked pasta and fake blood, and it looked so real.
You got to show me how to do that because I think next year I have to do something like that. I want to do some special effects stuff. That'd be fun.
It'll be in my recipe book.
Serving it for dinner. What's for dinner? This.
Yeah,
I'm cooking this in 2 hours.
It's a combination
guys.
of sausage and pasta. The cops are back at the station and they're like playing games and they're like useless goofballs. And they hear a report over the radio what kind of car that the gang has, and they realize it was on the road right by the parents' house when they left. So they quickly head out there, but on the way they run out of gas because they're complete buffoons, and they begin a slow walk to the house. Meanwhile, Mary does convince Junior to help her, and they're running away with hope of escape, but again, they're cut off by Krug. And he carves his name into Mary's chest, and then he rapes her. And it's awful.
Yeah.
Afterwards, we see her kind of walk away. She vomits, she prays, and then she just slowly walks into this large pond that they're near. And what I thought was just they just took the life from her. Like she just gave up all will to live right there is how I interpreted it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I mean, that was actually really intense. That whole scene, they're showing the facial expressions of everyone after it happens, so they're all kind of acting with their faces. And there's just look of horror and disgust and like void and like what just happened, like, you know, like it's just really it's awful. And then like, yeah, she just kind of just gives up and doesn't care, just slowly walks away, and then they slowly follow her. It's really eerie. It's an eerie scene.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable. And Krug takes out the gun that they have, and he fires 3 shots at her into the pond, and no, Mary's no more.
Yep.
So the gang then washes up. They're over it. You know, they've moved on. They you don't see any remorse or anything.
Yeah, back to laughing again and being like all, you know, jumbly in the way they are.
Yeah, they wash up. It's funny because they take their shirts off and they lay on this hill angled downwards and slide in their upper half of their bodies. And I said to my wife, I said, they even wash up like psychos.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Clean up like that.
Well, you know what though? That's good that they had it like that, because everything they did was psychotic. You know, like they were just these like just over the top crazies, you know, and like everything they did like fit that bill.
So they then all, you know, changed and cleaned up. They walked to the nearest house, which we know is Mary's parents' house.
And they don't know that yet.
They don't know it.
Right.
We, the audience, know it. And we get the, I don't know if you want to call it pleasure, but we get the joy of seeing all parties figured out, which is kind of cool because we're in the know the whole time.
The satisfaction of everything kind of coming together.
So when they get there, they're telling their cars broke down, and Mary's parents offered to let them stay until morning until they can get their car fixed. And that's what I was talking about as something that just would be unthinkable in today's world. And I don't, you know, I wasn't, you know, I was a baby when this movie came out, so I don't know if that's real world back then, but it seems awful, excessively neighborly and generous.
Yeah, this is the scene I was talking about as well, where I was like, at this point in the movie, I was like, oh, this movie's about like not that this is what the movie's about, but I was like, oh, there's just like the underlying issue here keeps being that there's just trust in strangers. You know, in the beginning, these girls like, yeah, we'll go up into your apartment and buy drugs downtown in the city, no big deal. And then later, the parents are just like, yeah, we'll invite these 3 strangers in off the street at nighttime. Come on in. You know, like that's 2 issues that happen, you know, for misplaced trust in this movie. And like you said, I don't know if that's how it was in certain areas in the country during that time, or if that was a portrayal of how people were 10, 15 years ago from that. You know, like was in the 72 was Wes Craven talking about how it was in the 60s, and you know what I mean? And like we don't know. I don't know.
You don't know, but it creates this tension where we know who all these people are, but they don't know who each other are. And one of the they said, well, we got a spare room, and I guess you could use Mary's room. That to me rings hollow, because you're not going to put these strangers in your daughter's bedroom,
especially after she's missing.
Yeah, spare room, okay, fine. Pull out couch, maybe, but you're not putting them in your daughter's room, but they do. So the thugs are in there, and they start seeing the pictures. You know, she has pictures.
And they're smoking and drinking, by the way. They're like lighting cigarettes, drinking Jack.
Yeah.
Just disrespecting the house. Yeah.
Jack that they took from downstairs, right? And they realize whose room they're in, and they think it's hysterical. They get the biggest kick out of it. Junior is going through his heroin withdrawal, and he is in the bathroom vomiting, and the mom goes in to see if he's okay. And at this point, she notices the necklace he's wearing, and she realizes, what are the odds? So she peeks in their luggage, where she finds bloody clothes, and then she kind of eavesdrops, and she hears them in Mary's room bragging about killing their daughter. So we now see the mom and dad go out in the middle of the night, where they find Mary's body.
Which I thought actually was cool, that she didn't like there was no hesitation. Like she told the dad, and the dad was like, okay, let's go. I believe, like there was no we're going to wait a second, these people, let's talk about it. But nope, they just, okay. And they book it. And I was like, all right.
Yeah. And they find the body, and they bring her body back, and they kind of start to plan their revenge.
It was like Home Alone at this point.
That's exactly what I wrote. Dad is booby trap in the house, Home Alone style.
Home Alone in it. Yeah.
And Weasel wakes up, and the mom seduces him, because he's been coming on to her the whole time. and leads him outside. She gets him like, she convinces him to tie his hands behind his back in a kinky kind of way.
Yeah, well, he's like I could make love to you with my hands tied behind my back, and then later she's like, "Hey, well, I want to take you up on that offer," and he's like, "Really?"
Yeah. I've always imagined a man that could do that type of thing, and he hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
But the really weird thing is, I found this to be very disturbing. One of the most disturbing parts of the movie, and not for the reason you think. She unzips him, and then
I think I know where you're going with this. Go ahead.
She is pleasuring him with her mouth. Right?
Yeah. This operation was supposed to last 3 seconds.
Like, why? You could do what you needed to do. Like, it goes farther. It
goes further than it has to. Right.
Yes.
He's like, I'm going to finish.
Yeah,
it's like when he says that, you're like, wait, why did it take that long?
Yeah. She brings him right to the edge and then bites completely off. And the notes I read said swallows it, which I didn't notice.
No.
But that's what it says she does on the Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
But regardless, she bites it clean off. I'm just thinking you could have done that with a knife, or you could have done it quickly. You did not have to engage in that act for that long to get to that point.
It's almost comedic. I want to talk to Wes Craven and ask him, I was like, was that like a bit? Like, you know what I mean? Like, were you just doing that for a bit? Like, I don't know.
Which it's just weird.
It is.
He screams, which his screams wake up the others. And, we see him run out and slip on a pile of shaving
cream. If that
cream.
happened to me, my scream would wake up the entire neighborhood, my whole town.
Yeah. It just, at this point, it's just madness.
Yeah, exactly.
Krug, Dad shoots Krug in the shoulder with some birdshot. All he's got is one cartridge.
Yep.
But obviously that's not going to put him down. And then Krug runs out and slips in the pile of shaving cream. That's where the Home Alone stuff starts to come in, and they start to fight. But Krug obviously gets the upper hand. He's younger,
more athletic.
Yeah. Junior comes in with the handgun and fires it, but he hits no one. And he's threatening to shoot Krug, and he's saying, "Leave these people alone." And Krug just berates him, calls him worthless, and convinces him to turn the gun on himself, which he does.
His own son,
which he's treated like crap since we've met him.
Yep.
At this point, Sadie's disgusted and runs out, where she encounters the mom and they fight. There's a little wire hooked up to a doorknob plugged in on a wet rug that
electrocutes you when you touch the thing.
Yeah, Krug grabs it and he gets zapped. And while this is going on, the dad goes into the basement and gets the chainsaw. So he's going after Krug with it. Outside, the women are fighting. Sadie's running, and she falls into a pool that she didn't know that the family had. It's dark. And when she surfaces, the mother slits her throat. Done.
Yeah. Which I thought was awesome that she went and got. The mom stepped up and tried to kill as many people as she could. It was awesome.
It was. My question goes back to, if she had this knife, she didn't have to perform that act with her mouth for that long on this thug that killed her daughter.
No, I think didn't Sadie have the knife and she tripped and fell, and then they wrestled for it?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm still bothered by that though.
I know. It's to me, that scene, that's a whole nother topic. That one scene could be a whole episode, because it's like, what happened? Later, the husband's gonna ask her. It's like, so you did it real quick though, right? Right?
Oh wait, you didn't use your mouth, did you? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
I didn't get the plan straight. It's just she's
got her own serial killer history where she goes around doing this to guys, and like we could get a spin off on that. And
one thing I did find funny though, is now the dad is stalking Krug with the chainsaw, and this movie came out before Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I thought the same thing. Yeah, I was like, oh, was this the first Chainsaw movie? Like, was this the first thing where, like, did Tobe Hooper see this and go, I want to do that? Like,
I was wondering the exact same thing. And the cops are bungling, inept cops walk into the house, just in time for the dad to tear up Krug with the chainsaw. And we don't see that. We see the blood, and we actually get blood on the face of the sheriff.
Yep.
And the movie ends with a still shot of the dad. So there's no aftermath. There's no what happened to these people. It is as pure of a revenge story as you're going to find, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's when you're done watching, you're like, what did I just watch? That was chaos from beginning to end. Like it's just the whole movie is just an insane ride. And it's funny, there's only a couple set pieces in the movie. There's the parents' house, you have the apartment of the bad guys, and then the little woods area, and then back to the parents' house, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah, it's a very simple movie made for I believe $100,000 back then. Which
is like $2 billion now.
Yeah, it went on to make I think $3 million in its initial run, which huge. Percentage-wise is a huge success for that time period. Movie was very controversial. It was almost considered pornographic by some.
I mean, when you watch the movie, you could say, like you said, it's almost like this was a porn script, and Wes Craven got a hold of it and said, "Can we make this a horror movie?" You know what I mean? Like
very true.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, pornographic stuff that's in this movie that you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, it was banned in the UK for many years. As I said, the blood is pretty tame by today's standards, but the violence is harsh and unflinching, and it has that gritty 70s edge to it. And I think David Hess is really, really good in the psychopath role.
Yeah, and it's not just blood. I mean, there's physical abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's drug addiction abuse, there's mental abuse. Like, this movie is just visceral. There's nothing good coming out of these people's like mouths. Like, they're driving down the road with these two girls in their trunk, and Weasel's like, I want to create the biggest sex crime of the country in the century, and Krug's like, I should just kill you. And like, everything they say is just nasty, like it's just, it doesn't have to be bloody for it to be like a brutal movie.
Yeah. And the parents, vengeance served cold is our category. The parents served the vengeance for sure.
Yeah, the chainsaw.
Our second movie we're going to cover tonight moves forward quite a bit. It's called The Retaliators from 2021. This movie is directed by Bridget Smith and Samuel Gonzalez Jr. And this is a movie that when it came up for this category, I didn't think I had saw it. And then when I went and watched it, I realized I had seen it before.
Oh, yeah.
Is this something you had seen or just watched for this?
No, I just watched it for this. I had heard of it. I'd seen the trailer when it came out like a year or two, like 2 years ago. It was on my radar, but I just never watched it. So I thought this was a good opportunity to check it out.
We open with two girls in a van, and they make one of those classic turn down an unmarked road. And then, you see on the ground was a sign that says do not enter. But they couldn't see it because it was down. And a very, very wrong turn type of vibe. Right from the beginning. Of course, they get a flat tire. And, that's first thing I thought of was like, this is just like Wrong Turn.
Yeah. That trope of like, right in the middle of the woods, it's like turning nighttime, it's getting dark out, and like all that. Then you get the flat tire at the worst possible time.
We see one of the driver is out changing the tire, and the other girl's just sitting in the van. And we see her just taken away. Just snatched away. And then we see a lumbering, mutant-looking man staggering towards the van, but is decapitated by a bloody guy who goes to the van to try to save the girl. But before he can, he's pulled away, and the van is overrun by something. And
it looks like zombies, right? We're just like zombies. But then when the guy opens the door, he's like, they're not zombies, and then gets whisked away. And we're just like, as an audience, like, what's going on here?
Yeah, what is this movie? Yeah, and inside the van, all you see all these people descend on the van, and it's kind of a pulled back shot, a long range shot, and you just see you hear tearing, and there's just like blood splatter on the window.
There's three of them consecutively. It's like pop, 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 and it's just like, what were they doing?
It's like a pack of wild dogs got in there or something.
That's a great analogy. That's what it seemed like. Yeah.
So then we cut. Okay, we're done with that scene. We don't know what happened, but we
go to Jersey. It's like, I thought we were just in Jersey. Like,
yeah. We see Sarah as a teenage girl at grief counseling. She lost her mother, and we hear a little bit of her story. And then she goes out with her father and little sister to get a Christmas tree, and a bully steals their tree, and the dad lets him take it. And Sarah gives him crap for it, for like, why do you do all these push-ups if you just let a bully take our tree?
Yeah, they would do that in Die Hard. Yeah, you watch Die Hard every day, Dad, you know.
Yeah. But we find out he's a pastor and he's nonviolent. And, you know, he tells the guy Merry Christmas instead of doing something back. Then we find a drug deal going wrong. There's a bald man called Ram, and he's doing a drug deal with a guy in a wheelchair. And it's a kind of a weird scene. Like nothing really happens. Ram just, for some unknown reason, turns on the guy. As he's reaching in the trunk, he smashes him with the trunk.
It was like your stereotypical WCW 90s like characters. Like the one guy's like crazy and talks too much, and then the other guy's like crazy but doesn't say anything, and they're gonna square off. And like it was
that was supposed to be here's the drugs, here's the money. Everybody goes their separate way. For some reason, Ram, who we see to be a psycho through the course of the movie, he bashes him with the trunk, and then we see him shove his mouth onto the tailpipe of his running car.
Yeah, crushes his teeth, like come out. And I was like, that was pretty cool.
And he's just holding him there, like breathing the exhaust.
Now we don't know why this happens, but we do find out in like two scenes. He's on the phone and he says, "Now this town's going to know who's in charge." So Ram's trying to assume control and take control of these groups, these gangs.
Yeah, so he takes off. He's got the drugs and the money, and he leaves. Well, Pastor John lets his daughter Sarah go to a party, but she has to be home by 11:30, and she has to stop for gas. And to her poor luck, she pulls in for gas and is parked next to Ram, and she hears the body of the other guy rustling in the trunk. So Ram comes at her because now she's heard that he's got a guy in the trunk, but she maces him and drives off. She calls her dad. She doesn't call the cops. She calls her dad and says, you know, this just happened. I'm scared. He's chasing me. And he gets her to pull over, and he zip ties her hands to the steering wheel and pushes her car into the lake, killing her. And it's just like, oh God, it's awful.
It's heartbreaking. She's a teenager. She's in high school. You know, she's like 16, 17-year-old, you know.
So Pastor John, the father, is going crazy. He's alone. He's like slamming his head against the wall. He's how you would imagine, losing a child, most awful thing you could think of.
Yeah.
He tells Jed, the detective, that he's going to look around as well. Jed advises him not to do that, but it kind of gives Jed an insight into how upset and how obsessed this man is, which comes into play. So he sends his youngest daughter to stay with his sister, and he just starts driving around. Jed goes to the gas stations in the area, pulls security footage, and figures out what he needs to figure out, and locates the car.
Yeah. He's like on a mission. Like he goes to the gas station. He's like, I need those tapes. And like, they're like, yeah, okay. And like, he gets real stern. He's like, I'm getting those tapes. Like,
yeah,
you got a warrant? On his own mission.
He's like, no, but I'm seeing those tapes.
Yeah.
And he pulls Ram over, and before there can be any, banter between them, he just injects him with something that knocks him out. So he takes him. We see the gang and that Ram was supposed to be working for, and they talk about how they were brokering peace between two rival gangs, and he messed the whole thing up, and now it's going to be a war, and the mob boss is not happy. He's kind of a very, it's in a boxing gym, and he looks like an old boxing trainer. It's kind of, stereotypical kind of mob boss guy.
This is where we have our meetings in this shady little place that we own. It's kind of like a front. They don't really care about training the community. They kind of own the building and have it set up as a business front and kind of do some dirty stuff in the back. Their dealings, And
while he's yelling at his gang members, he of course takes a minute to, yell at the boxer in the ring, "Move your feet." and then just continues with, yelling at the guys,
Yeah.
It's like, it was like mob boss, Jim scene 101.
Yeah.
So the gang is all upset. The mob boss is not happy, and he sends them to go get to the other gang before they come get him. We see Jed has Ram tied up in like a deep basement or prison or some kind of
I wrote dungeon, some kind of dungeon looking thing. He's like kind of crucified up on this thing. He's getting electrocuted, and like you can hear like he's got that low voice protected sound like to his voice and stuff like that. Like, you will speak in this manner, kind of. He's like training him to be tortured.
Yeah, he tells him that he's now he's shocking him. He tells him he's now number 21, and that's how he'll be referred to from now on. And Jed and John meet out to discuss the case, and they have a drink. And John takes the drink. He said, "I don't really drink," and he's like, "Yeah, I think you're going to want it." And he just takes it. Okay. And they discuss. Jed tells him about what happened to him 10 years earlier. There was a serial murderer and rapist named Quinn Brady, and
who's played by the lead singer of Papa Roach, Jacoby Shaddix.
Yes.
There's Tommy Lee's in this movie. He's the DJ at the strip club. They have some cameos in here. Yeah.
Five Finger Death Punch, I think, has
Zoltan Bathory. Yeah, who's also a 2021 Jiu-Jitsu silver medalist. I did not know that.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
He tells him that Quinn Brady killed his wife, his pregnant wife, on his birthday in his house, and he came home to a bloody mess. And asked John if he would like 1 minute alone with the man who killed his daughter. And he basically says it was very healing for me. And
because he asked me, he's like, how'd you get through? He's like, I healed.
Yeah. So they drive out to the remote cabin that Jed said was his father's, and he brings him in, and John confronts Ram. He selects an ice pick, and he gets up to him, and you see the anger boiling over in him, but ultimately he can't do it. And Jed is disappointed. I thought you were like me. And he says, well, now you know my secrets. I can't let you leave. So he tasers John.
Yeah, he says only complicit men take secrets to their grave. You need to get down on this, or I don't trust you to not rat me out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. When John wakes up, he's tied into a wheelchair, and he's shown a cage full of captured criminals that Jed has tortured to the point of them basically being subhuman.
Yeah, the scene where the bad guy reveals his plan before he kills him type thing. That's what this was to me.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
There's one guy's in like the torture box, and he gives him water through a squirt gun.
Yeah, he says something about like keeping him in this box for a week kind of changes things for them. Yeah.
He holds the gun up to him. He's like, "Should I, John?" He's like, "No." And then he's like, "I'm going to." And then he's like, "Squirt, squirt, squirt, squirt."
Just giving him water, just enough water to live. Yeah.
He throws in number 21, previously known as Ram, and he tells him, "Watch the crowd attack the new meat."
Yeah, and he's like, "Listen, just in case there isn't a hell after life, because there's a lot of religious tones. This is a very heavy religious tone." He was like, "Just in case there isn't a hell, I want them to experience as much hell now, just in case."
Yeah, very true. When the gang members had attacked the other gang, they located trackers that were in the drugs. So they used those trackers to locate Ram's car, which in turn locates the cabin in the woods. So the gang busts in right at this time, and they confront Jed. While this is going on, John gets free, and he throws the keys to the cage to the prisoners, which is I completely question the logic of doing that. I know it was to cover up his own attempted escape, but whether you agree or disagree with what Jed is doing, you know what kind of people these are, and you've seen them just ravage number 21 like they were, again, like a pack of wild dogs. I don't know that you'd want them out.
No, it's questionable, but I guess the point is you're putting yourself at risk by doing this, and also like these are child molesting murderers monsters, and that they are locked up for all intents purposes, and you're just letting them out. Like you could let the authorities know that they're there and have the authorities come. You know what I mean? Like, hey, these guys are all here. Like, but yeah, that was very questionable. But I guess
took it as a distraction to allow him to get away. But at what cost?
Right, yeah, exactly.
So they erupt and they attack Jed and they attack the gang. They kind of get in the middle of that war, and John tries to escape. And he's up in the living room, and several catch him, including Quinn Brady, who number one. Yeah, so you can tell Jed started doing this 10 years ago, and he's just been adding on ever since. And he's like, he's mine. And he comes over to attack John, and Jed staggers into the room and shoots all of them before dying from his own wounds,
and effectively saving the pastor's life.
Absolutely. At this point, John armors up like a Rocky IV training montage. He armors up and rides out on a motorcycle.
Which I think is funny because you see his character completely change because he takes the tarp off the motorcycle and he's like, fuck yeah. And it's like, wait, you were a pastor 10 minutes ago. Now you're swearing and saying F yeah. And
yeah, it doesn't
you can see sense. It was like, yeah, I mean, I guess the character, like the revenge peeled like part of that personality off of him, right? Like he was so like he was so grieved that in wanting revenge that like it kind of transformed him and turned him into a monster, right?
But when he was faced with an opportunity for revenge, he couldn't.
He wouldn't turn into a monster, right? Which to me was the incoherence in the movie with that part of the character. It just didn't work.
I agree. There's a scene earlier when his daughter, Sarah, before when she's kind of teasing him about not standing up to the bully. She mentions how he talks about getting a motorcycle, but he never actually goes through with it, and she's kind of like poking at his manhood. And I found it kind of funny. He goes through all this. He armors up. He gets on the motorcycle, and he takes off. And about 50 feet down the road, he wipes out.
Which is what would happen if it's your first time on a motorcycle and you're taking off.
So yeah, then he gets attacked. There's now there's some cool kills.
Some decent
kills.
The action scenes were nice in this movie.
He kills a man with the bike chain after getting it around his neck.
Yeah.
He chops another off at the feet with a machete. It's just a pair of feet standing there, and the body flops over. And he Day of the Dead copy kills one with a shovel right through the middle of his head.
Yeah. I thought the same thing. I was like, Day of the Dead. Yeah, yep. I thought the same thing.
Yeah. And then he hears the horn from the van, and we get to see the opening scene over again. It's the same exact scene, just with more context now.
So we were in Jersey.
We were. Yeah. And everything. So we see why he's pulled away. He's pulled under the van by a group of these. We see the girl get, just annihilated into a splatter of blood.
In my notes, I had them called caged people. That's what I was like, the caged people.
Okay. Caged people. That makes sense. He kills the attackers. He bashes one against a rock. He machetes another. He's basically just killing them to get away at this point.
Smashing the head against I thought that was cool. They had some fun stuff with this.
And he walks out of the woods, and he basically sees an older couple's house. We see, older couple with a little bit of banter, and the man's putting the Christmas tree in the wood chipper. And of course, as we've learned, it's like, aha, wood chipper. Can't wait till we see that in action.
The rifle, yeah, Chekhov's rifle, right? Like the rifle on the stage. Yeah, if it's not on there, that's got to be used.
Yep. So it's like, oh, cool, wood chipper. And before anything can happen, Ram arrives, and he's got a chunk missing out of his ear. He went through hell, but he's intact, and now he's looking for a way out.
Yeah, he's got murderous rage in his eyes.
And he's attacking the older couple, looking for keys to their truck. And John attacks him. He just goes lunging at him, picks up a chair and hits him over the back with the chair. And they fight. But Ram is large and strong and tough. And before long, he's winning.
Yeah, he was one of the Frost Giants in one of the Thor movies. So, I mean, he's pretty tough.
Yes, yeah. It's come a long way.
Yeah.
John gets thrown through the wall out into the barn or to the shed where the wood chipper was. But wood chipper's not running, so it's just kind of in the background now. And Ram puts John's head in a steel vise, and he's just cranking it. And then he
it reminded me of
torments
Casino, because they do this in Casino where they put the guy's head in the vise in Casino and pop one of his eyeballs out.
Yeah,
and I was like, come on, how far are they going to take this? And they didn't.
Well, he
has to live, right?
And I'm thinking they crank it. He's cranking it more than he should be able to crank it, and John continue on.
Right, yeah.
The whole keeps giving it another crank and another crank, tormenting him in between each crank and saying, oh, your daughter fought more than you did, and just saying awful stuff to him. But at the last minute, before his head is crushed and he's completely gone, he pulls out his daughter's necklace from his pocket and stabs Ram straight into the eye, pulling his eyeball out.
Yeah, and they really indulged this one.
Yeah,
they showed the whole thing popping right out. I was like, "That's
pulls it right out slow."
I was like, "That's the cool effect how they did it, though." I have a huge appreciation for practical effects like that. I love it.
He uncranks his own head from the vise, and he gets up, and Ram's staggering around, yelling and screaming, and he pushes him into the wood chipper. And he had got the wood chipper to run when he was kicking. When he was in the vise, his foot had kicked it and got it started conveniently. And then Ram goes into the wood chipper feet first, and he gets chopped up all the way up to his upper torso, and he's just left hanging in the chute. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, that was an excessive amount of blood. It was just shooting straight out,
flying out of the chute.
And I'm watching this. I was like, at some point, this motor's going to burn out, right?
Yeah, it does.
It does. Yeah. Because if it had taken his whole body, I would have been like, "There's no way."
Yeah. Then we cut to John is at the grief counseling group, same one Sarah went to, and he's reading from Sarah's diary. We see him go to his church, and he gives a sermon. And he takes his youngest daughter. He says, "Hey, it's her first softball game. It's not really fair, but I'm going to ask for a little prayer for, my daughter's softball team." And everybody laughs. He takes her to the batting cages to prepare for her first game. And a bully kicks her out of the cage so his son can bat instead. And this time John stands up to the bully and punches him out.
He looks at the daughter and says, "You're going to have to forgive me for this." And they turn around and you see the punch, and that's it. Yeah.
And that's the end of the movie. And it made me question the message. And I know these movies, if you go back to like the Death Wish movies and even the first movie we talked about, Last House on the Left, you do find yourself rooting for the vengeful people if they're, if they were wronged. And that's kind of a weird and unnatural thing to some degree, because you're rooting for death and mayhem, but you almost feel like it's justified.
Well, when we talk about revenge and vengeance, what we're talking about is like a form of justice where there wouldn't be justice otherwise, right? Like these people get away with it, and like we see these movies where people are like, no, they're not going to get away with it, right? Like we're gonna take something and we're gonna take this into our own hands.
Again, I just wonder what the message is from him now adopting violence as a solution to his problems,
especially as a pastor. Right. Yeah. The message to me was very convoluted. It didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that's my overall take on this movie. Is it had some cool parts, but my biggest takeaway is its untapped potential, because you really could have done a lot with the dynamic of the reluctant, violent revenge from the pastor. Yeah. And it's really only dabbled with. A lot of the concepts are just dabbled with, and then the actions and the follow-up actions aren't consistent to say
they're kind of
what are you trying to say here? Where are you going with this? And I guess at the end, I'd say it's not really saying anything. It was just an excuse to put some violence on the film.
That is exactly what I thought. I was like, I don't think this movie is trying to say anything. I think it had an opportunity to talk about the reconciliation of grief and revenge and where your morals stand, like and where you Like, at what point are they so displaced where you change like your moral aptitude to handle those types of situations? You know, what is your breaking point? They had all these interesting dynamics that they could have done, and they didn't get into any of it at any point. At no point. They had all these different characters. They had, you know, they had the detective character that hid his background, and they had, you know, the pastor, and you know, none of it was delved into, like you said. So I think they just kind of dropped the ball on that, and maybe there was never really an intention to write it that deep. They just, like you said, wanted to have fun.
Yeah, I think, and I get that if you just want to, you know, hey, let's just put some violence on the. But I almost feel like, then why make him a pastor? Why create that conflict if you're not going to pursue, you know, what this does to him and the impact it has on him? And you know, it would have made more sense if he came back and stopped being a pastor, or if if he, you know, if he showed, you know, torment along the way as he was performing these acts of self-preservation, and he's just flip a switch, and now I'm a killer, and now I'm back to being a pastor, and now I'll punch the guy without hesitation. It just doesn't really jive. I think the movie missed the mark, and you know, it's a gleeful, you know, bloody mess of entertainment. Nothing deeper than that.
It's a Hallmark action movie.
There you go.
You know, that's what it felt like. It was just like,
Gotcha. Yeah. Again, this is a cool subject. There's a lot of great movies in this category. It was a lot of fun to do, and it's something we certainly could revisit with some of the other titles, you know, we talked about, and many, many more.
Yeah, I think, you know, down the line we'll revisit again, because I think there's some higher quality movies of this subject. You know, I think the Last House on Left, the original, has to be talked about. It's one of the originals. It had its cultural impact in the 70s. You know, there was ads for that movie that said that came out. You can look them up on YouTube, and like they had ads, like a campaign for the movie that said to prevent yourself from fainting, just remind yourself it's just a movie. It's just a movie. Like they had ads that came out for people to watch, and that they were saying this is just a movie. It's not real.
Yeah.
You know,
they credit that tagline with being the reason for the financial success, because the movie had several different titles in production, and Wes Craven actually hated the title Last House on the Left. It made no sense in the parameters of the movie.
Yeah. Did he say what he wanted to be called, or just said he didn't like it?
It was originally called The Sex Crime of the Century.
Oh, like, yeah, from the car conversation where they put that line in there. Yeah.
And then it was, you know, it was called like Krug's Crew, or, you know, there was a few different titles that kicked around, but he hated Last House on the Left as a title. But they do credit that tagline that you just spoke about as being a big draw to get people to watch it.
Yeah, I like The Last House on Left as a name. You know, I like when names are very elusive to makes the audience go like, what's that about? Like, you look at The Shining. You know, The Shining that could have just been called Haunted Mansion. You know what I mean? Like, but it's like The Shining. What the heck is The Shining? You know, you have to watch the movie to find out, right? You know what I mean? Like, Last House on the Left, what's that mean? You know what I mean? Like, and it ends up being that the house that they go to, it's, you know what I mean? Like, I think like Sex Crime of the Century, it's like, okay, that's just really on the nose. Like, that's obviously what this is. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I like when they're more like, you know, they kind of sneak in there with a clever name.
Yep. Absolutely. So, yeah, interesting topic, and a couple interesting movies, you know, of varying quality. But
great way to start the year off with a little bit of revenge.
A little bit of revenge, and it's middle of winter, so we're serving our vengeance nice and cold.
Ice cold. Yeah.
Well, that's our episode for this week. We appreciate you listening as always. We are the Weekly Horoscope. I'm Jerry. That's Matt, and we will see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year, everyone.
Your Weekly Horoscope with Jerry and Matt.